Hi everyone. I want to welcome you to my submission of the final assignment for integrating technologies in a classroom. And for this assignment, I decided to choose a software application called the Dartfish experiment or Dartfish. You could also use Coach's Eye, and some of you might be familiar with these software applications as they have their genesis in the athletic world, in which people want to analyze, say, a golf swing or a swing in a baseball bat or pitching. A lot of times in athletics, they want to be biomechanically sound, especially for pitching. You want to be biomechanically sound so that the pitcher doesn't injure themselves. In this case, I'm taking these applications, and we also use these applications in the medical field, especially when we want to look in the world of orthotics and prosthetics. As you can see from the title slide, essentially you can videotape or do a video capture, draw in angles to make sure that you're achieving the proper goals. And in prosthetics and orthotics, we always try to mimic normal human locomotion. We also want the patient to be as close to normal as we possibly can. So this idea of taking Dartfish and integrating it into a curriculum, it's not done right now, and it really should be, because it really enhances the understanding when students are fitting a leg for the first time. They understand how to align a prosthesis. Sure, they get it in biomechanics and they understand everything, but that is more rote memorization. In this exercise, the student is forced to show a deeper understanding by drawing angles in on their own and using it to analyze how well they fit the prosthesis. So let's move forward a little bit and let's talk about this program or this lesson plan. This is really an exciting time for the students because the first project in lower limb, this is the first time students actually make a prosthesis that the person will put weight on and actually ambulate in. So it's also a scary time also because there have been times when a student tries to put a leg on, it doesn't work, and the cold sweats build in. But it's usually a very exciting time to see how successful they are. Part of the process with the after building a prosthesis that the socket fits on a residual limb is to align it so they're comfortable. The whole purpose of using Dartfish or Coach's Eye is to offer the student a chance to give a video analysis of the gait. So what are the basic demographics in the O&P programs across the United States? Well, for the most part, it's a master's level. It's a 2-year master's to be an O&P clinician. So the average age is approximately about 23 in discussing with all the faculty members. The gender breakdown in more recent times is a 50-50 split, which is pretty amazing because when I went to school, I had no females in my prosthetics class. The cultural breakdown is pretty much across the board is mostly American based and Caucasian. I would say that you're looking at approximately 10% minorities. And the fact that students are coming into the programs right out of college, they have very little prior experience than when I went to school. When I went to school, it was the type of profession that you grew up in and a lot of people are legacies. Their parents had the lab and are going to inherit it. Now it's nothing like that anymore. So you have students from all different types of backgrounds wanting to be an O&P clinician. So the course objectives, without being boring, we're going to talk about what the students are going to learn in this design. Well, when this lesson plan is done, the student should be able to list advantages and disadvantages to a patella tendon bearing supracondylar suprapatellar prosthetic design. That's what the PTB acronym is for. They should also be able to list indications and contraindications of when you would use this design. Students will learn how to will perform a clinical assessment. By that I mean you'll examine a residual limb. You're going to take range of motion measurements. You're going to test the muscle strength. You're going to check the neurology of that limb, skin integrity. The students also are going to perform a video capture, actually two, one on their original prosthesis and one on the student's prosthesis, and they're going to compare the two. The students are also going to learn how to use the Dartfish application to deconstruct the phases of gait. So what learning theories do we imply in prosthetics and orthotics? It's a multifaceted approach. The one thing that's the beautiful aspect of in the field of orthotics and prosthetics, it basically works both sides of the brain. It's not just a science. Designing a prosthesis requires also art. In that, that's where we talk about the cognitive approach, in which the students have to start to learn and build through the environmental aspect of things and learning from one another. They see and they do. Constructivists, they start to build and they get experiential learning. We start to talk about Dewey, Piaget. We start to talk about Bruner. We start to talk about Vygotsky's zone of proximal development. You really start to test that student and put the learning up just slightly above what they can and have them strive. The social learning theory comes into play, in which they learn to model from the instructor. The instructor does the initial lecture where they're going to actually fabricate in front of them and also align the legs. So they learn from that. 21st century learning, they start to learn skills that's going to take them into the clinical practice and learn how they can do evidence-based practice using the applications that we're going to talk about. Identify, well, the type, and this brings me into the type of technology, and we start to talk about 21st century learning. The students are going to learn how to use PowerPoint. Not that they don't already, but they're going to have to put together a PowerPoint presentation to show off to their classmates, in which they're going to use their tablet. Part of the tuition at the schools, the students are issued a tablet that has all the references, all the reading material, and certain software applications. In this case, they're going to use Dartfish or Coach's Eye, so it'll all be in place. So those types of ideas, so they're going to learn these skills to translate into developing evidence-based practice in the clinical sense in the future. So let's take a look at the lesson plan. Day one is kind of busy because they do a pretty hardcore evaluation on the individual. If you look on the left, that's a picture of a residual limb for a below-the-knee amputee, or a person with an amputation, sorry. The student evaluates the patient and records a video clip in their prosthesis. Well, the evaluation of the residual limb is, let's look at the length of the limb, let's look at musculature, let's look at the neurology, let's look at anatomical landmarks. Let's look at skin integrity. After that, they put them in their prosthesis and they have them do a walk in it, and they take a video capture. This happens to be in one of the gait labs that was in the where I used to be employed. A little fancier than using a tablet, but you get the idea of the types of designs when we do a video capture. That video that you're watching shows both planes. The one on the left is called the coronal plane. The one on the right is the sagittal plane. Once we get done with the evaluation, the student will take a plaster bandage wrap, then they will modify the limb. By modifying, we file down the plaster model of their limb so that we could be very attentive to pressure sensitive areas of the limb, but we could also load pressure tolerant areas. So, because that's what you see on the right is what the patient has to walk on a prosthesis, and they have to be comfortable. Once they're done with that, they fabricate a socket, as you can see in the right, and the student will set up the leg based on the length of the limb, or the length of their unaffected side, and they call what's called bench alignment. You're following a textbook number to set up just to stand the patient on. Once you get the patient standing and you do static alignment, static being no motion, then you progress to them walking. It's called dynamic alignment. And so the student and the instructor are going to watch the patient walk in both planes. The student makes alignment changes based on what they see and what they're instructed to do by the instructor until the patient is comfortable. Once the patient is comfortable, the student once again is going to do a video capture. And then they're going to do is draw different lines in at different phase of gait. In this case, you see initial contact or heel strike. The student's going to draw in what is the pylon angulation in relation to the foot, and the vector arrow shows the direction the knee is moving. So the student is going to do that in each phase of gait, and then they're going to compare it to what they see in the coronal plane. This photo shows the coronal plane and the patient shows a vertical pylon or a vertical shin as what you're looking at. So you can see the line that I drew is completely vertical or perpendicular to the floor. This is extremely important in that it tells me that the foot is flat on the floor and the person is not walking on the inside of the foot or the outside of the foot. When everything is finished, you're going to see that the person is going to present, when they're finished, they're going to develop a PowerPoint presentation with their learning partner because they're usually paired up, two students to a patient. Then they'll work together on looking at the alignment both on the qualitative or what they saw versus the quantitative, which is spelled wrong in my slide. But the quantitative design is a video breakdown with all the vectors and the angles. Combining the two will let the student know if in fact how close they are to normal human locomotion. This is extremely important as we move further into clinical practice because this data is necessary to interact with research and provide evidence-based practice. The student develops a clinical expertise, in turn designs evidence-based practice, which becomes best practices. By doing this little exercise with a video software package, this shows proof that they have improved the functional aspect for that patient. So the student can do a 2-minute walk test. They can do a video analysis. They can provide this type of evidence to insurance companies so that they in turn could get funding. So in closing, I just wanted to emphasize the importance of using. This is not a gait lab, but it is a video tool that is very helpful in learning and helping the student understand how to break down the phases of gait, how to take and use these 21st century skills and use them in clinical practice, which will take them a long way. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed my presentation.